The day had come to give her answer to the prince. Throughout the night, her thoughts had twisted and turned, each scenario darker than the last. Finally, she resolved to face the prince alone, hoping her decision might shield Ebuka from further harm. With a quiet courage, Nina approached the royal palace. The guards, recognizing her, let her pass with somber nods. Her steps echoed in the ground always, each one heavier than the last as she moved towards the prince's quarters. Upon hearing her decision, the prince's eyes lit up with a triumph that chilled Nina to her core. She told him she accepted his proposal, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The prince, wasting no time, assured her that arrangement would be made swiftly. Nina was then escorted to a small, ornate room within the palace, where she was told to wait. The prince quickly sought the king and the queen to obtain their consent for the marriage. The king, unaware of the true circumstances behind the sudden engagement, gave his blessing, trusting his son's judgment. After receiving the king's consent, the queen met Nina in the room where she was waiting earlier. The door closed softly behind the queen, her demeanor shifting as soon as they were alone. With a cold precision, she warned Nina that any attempt to speak to the king about the real nature of her engagement would endanger Ebuka's life. Her words were sharp, a stark contrast to her regal appearance, leaving Nina with no illusion about the seriousness of the threat. Feeling more trapped than ever, Nina was escorted to her room, now under strict surveillance. The palace, with its towering walls and luxurious halls, became a guarded prison. As she sat by the window, looking out at the gardens, she could no longer walk freely. Nina held on to the hope that somehow, despite everything, she and Ebuka would find their way back to each other. Early in the morning, as the village stirred to life, Ebuka's mother made her way to the humble home of Nina's grandmother. Upon arriving, she was greeted warmly by Nina's grandmother, who had been sitting on her front porch, her face lined with worry. She had noticed Nina's troubled expression that morning and felt a deep unease since her granddaughter had departed at dawn, her steps hurried and her smile forced. As they sat together, the gentle clacking of the grandmother's knitted needles paused. Ebuka's mother shared everything that had transpired. The prince's cruel ultimatum. Her voice was low but filled with a determined undercurrent, as if speaking the truth louder might make it more bearable. Nina's grandmother listened intently, her eyes reflecting the pain of the situation but also a flicker of resolve. After a moment of heavy silence, she set aside her knitting, her posture straightening as she focused on the matter at hand. "It seems we are at the mercy of the prince's whims," she sighed, her voice steady despite the worry that clouded her eyes. "But we are not without our own strengths, our own cunning." Ebuka's mother nodded, leaning in closer as they began to discuss a plan they chose not to voice aloud just yet, keeping it between themselves as a silent pact. As they concluded their discussion, they stood together, a momentary embrace conveying their shared strength and determination. As the wedding week concluded, the royal palace buzzed with preparations, each day marked by a flurry of activity. Amidst this orchestrated chaos, the prince extended an invitation to Nina's grandmother to stay at the palace. To the outside world, it was portrayed as a tender gesture. a show of familial affection from the royal family to the elder of a soon-to-be royal bride. However, beneath the surface, the invitation was a strategic move to ensure Nina's grandmother remained close. Her presence in the palace, a silent message of control and surveillance. Nina's grandmother, well aware of the true nature of the invitation, accepted with quiet grace. Upon her arrival, she was treated with outward respect and given comfortable accommodations. Yet, the careful watch of discreet guards did not escape her notice. They masked their vigilance with polite smiles, but their eyes seldom missed anything, keeping a close watch on her movements and interactions. Back in the village, whispers and rumors about Ebuka's absence began to stir among the villagers. Ebuka, known for his kindness and visibility in the community, had rarely been seen in recent days. Some expressed concern, but without clear information. These whispers remained just that, soft, uncertain murmurs that drifted through the village like leaves in the wind. Ebuka's mother, also under watchful eyes, went about her daily tasks with a calm exterior. Inside her heart was heavy with worry for her son and frustration over her limited ability to act. The guards assigned to monitor her were less conspicuous than those at the palace, yet their presence was a constant reminder of the prince's reach and influence. Throughout the village and the palace, a tense quietude settled over the usual vibrancy of life. Those in the know carried their worries silently, their concern cloaked under the routine of their daily life, while preparations for the grand royal wedding marched steadily forward. On the day of the wedding, the royal palace was adorned with vibrant flowers and elegant decorations. The air filled with the sweet fragrance of blossom and the soft music of the royal orchestra. Guests from near and far gathered, their finery shimmering in the sunlight as they awaited the grand procession. As the ceremony commenced, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Nina, dressed in a beautiful gown that sparkled under the sun, moved through the procession with a quiet dignity, her expression serene yet distant. At her side, Nina's grandmother watched, her wise eyes missing nothing, a knowing smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Suddenly, the harmonious flow of the wedding was shattered by a loud commotion at the back of the gathering. Ebuka's friends, along with a group of spirited village youth, burst into the venue. Their faces were set with determination, their voices raised in firm opposition to the marriage. "Stop the wedding!" they shouted, their disruption rippling through the crowd like a sudden storm. "This union is not just." The unexpected uproar caught the royal guards off guard, and for a moment chaos reigned. The prince's face twisted in anger and surprise as he realized that his carefully laid plans were unraveling before his eyes. The king, alerted by this noise, stepped forward, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. His gaze swept over the crowd, landing on the group of young protesters, and then to his son seeking an explanation. In the midst of this, Nina's grandmother's smile broadened slightly, her eyes sparkling with pride and expectation. Her plan with Ebuka's mother finally set in motion. Previously, Ebuka's mother had met with some of Ebuka's friends and told them all that was happening, requesting they gathered a small crowd on the wedding day. She had hoped for a sign of resistance, a break in the silence that had weighed heavily on her heart. Now, as the voices of the villagers filled the air, she felt a surge of relief and hope, knowing that the spirit of their community was as strong and vibrant as ever. The commotion brought the procession to a standstill, the air now thick with tension and the potential for change. The king raised his hand, calling for silence, ready to hear the truth behind the unrest at what was meant to be a joyous occasion. The sudden silence that fell over the crowd was palpable. All eyes were on the king as he stood, regal, yet visibly shaken. In the midst of the halted wedding procession, with a steady voice that commanded attention despite the earlier chaos, he asked for an explanation. One of Ebuka's friends, a young man known for his honesty and bravery, stepped forward. With respect but firm conviction, he spoke. "Your Majesty, this marriage is not founded on love but on coercion. We cannot stand by while our friends suffer injustice." The crowd murmured in agreement, the air thick with tension and anticipation. The prince, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment, tried to interject, but the king raised his hand to silence him, his gaze stern. Turning to Nina, the king asked gently, "Is this true, my child? Speak freely, you are safe here." Nina, empowered by the support of her friends and the presence of her grandmother, found her voice. "Yes, Your Majesty," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I do not wish to marry the prince. I was threatened and so was the well-being of my loved one, Ebuka." A gasp swept through the crowd. The king's expression softened with sorrow and dismay as he processed Nina's words. He looked towards his son, disappointment etched deeply on his face. The king then addressed the assembly, his voice resonant with authority and regret. "It seems we have been misled by desires that overshadow the virtues of truth and justice. We must correct this wrong." He motioned for the guards to bring Ebuka forward. As Ebuka appeared, looking weary yet relieved to be among his friends and loved ones, the crowd parted to let him through. When he reached Nina, they exchanged a look of mutual support and understanding, their bond unbroken despite the trials they had faced. The king observed the silent exchange and felt a profound sense of injustice. Turning back to the gathering, he declared, "Let it be known that this wedding will not proceed. We must uphold the principle of fairness and love in this kingdom." The prince, realizing the gravity of his action and the firm resolve of his father, stood silently. His earlier arrogance faded. The crowd, led by the village youth and Ebuka's friend, erupted in quiet applause, relieved and heartened by the king's decision to honor truth and justice over royal decree. As the crowd began to settle, a profound silence enveloped in the air, Ebuka's mother stepped forward. With a grace born of years of silent suffering, she approached the king, her presence commanding yet humble. "Your Majesty," she began, her voice resonant with a mix of sorrow and strength. "There is more you must know." The king, his curiosity piqued and a sense of foreboding in his heart, nodded for her to continue. "Many years ago," she said, "I was wrongfully banished from this palace, accused of infidelity, but the truth was twisted by those who sought to gain from my absence." The crowd listened, rapt as she recounted her secret visits to the king's aunt, a wise old woman who had left the palace under mysterious circumstances. "I never met with another man. I met with your aunt, my friend and confidant. I always told you this, but you did not believe," she said, her eyes seeking understanding. Just as murmurs began to ripple through the crowd, an elderly woman led by a young villager appeared at the edge of the assembly. Her timing, as if guided by the stars themselves, was impeccable. She was the king's long-lost aunt. Her arrival a coincidence that felt like fate. Stepping into the clearing, she confirmed Ebuka's mother's story. The king, his face a mask of confusion and relief, turned towards the new queen, his current wife, who had once been a mere maid in the palace. Her face, once composed, now betrayed a flicker of fear. Emboldened by the unfolding truths, other villagers began to step forward, voicing their own grievances and the injustices they had suffered at the hands of the prince and the new queen. Each story, each testimony built a stronger case against the deceit and manipulation that had plagued the kingdom. As the murmurs of the crowd subsided, the king, deeply shaken by the revelations, turned to address the assembly once more. His gaze settled on his wife, the queen, who stood beside him, her composure faltering under the weight of the crowd's scrutiny. For years, the king began, his voice heavy with regret, I was led to believe a falsehood. The queen, once a maid in this very palace, claimed she saw Lady Grace with a man. Even the guards I have sent to spy, misled by her influence, confound this deceitful story. The king paused, the gravity of his misjudgment settling over him like a cold shroud. He looked around at the faces of his subjects, their expressions a mix of anger, sympathy, and hope. It was a lie, crafted to remove Lady Grace from this palace, to elevate oneself through treachery, he continued, his voice now firmer, a resolve to correct past wrongs resonating in each word. Prince Ekene and his mother, the queen, exchanged a glance, a fleeting moment of panic. Stepping forward, the prince attempted to salvage their position. Further, these accusations are business, merely coincidence twisted into conspiracy, he pleaded, his voice a blend of desperation and defiance. The queen, too, tried to defend herself, her words quick and anxious. My king, I only ever sought to protect your family from disgrace. I believe these guards. I thought I was doing right by our crown. But the proud's mood had shifted palpably. The testimonies of the villagers, the undeniable truth spoken by the king's own auntie, and the integrity of Ebuka's mother painted a clear picture of manipulation and deceit. The king, once deceived, was not swayed this time by the words of his wife or his son. Enough, the king declared, his voice echoing commandingly over the palace grounds. The evidence is too great and the harm you have caused too deep. Your actions have not only betrayed my trust but attacking the hearts of our people. He turned to his guards, his decision clear. Prince Ekene and Queen shall be removed from their position and will face the consequences of their actions. We will have justice and we will restore trust within our kingdom. The assembly, moved by the king's decisive action, erupted into a chorus of approval. Justice, long obscured by deceit, was finally coming to light, bringing with it a promise of renewal and honesty in the heart of the kingdom. In the midst of the confession and the crowd's murmurs of support, a moment of profound personal revelation shook Ebuka. As he learned of his true lineage, revealed in the eyes of the king, who stood not just as a ruler, but now as his father. A tumult of emotions swept through him. His heart raced with a mixture of anger for the years of deception and a burgeoning joy at the unexpected discovery of his identity. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked into the crowd, his gaze meeting that of the man who was his father. The complexity of these feelings left him momentarily lost, grappling with a past meeting in the span of a single day. Beside him, his mother, now vindicated and free from the shadows of false accusation, felt a different kind of resolve. Despite the king's heartfelt apology and the offers to restore her to the palace, she declined. The years of simple life and the pain of past betrayals had reshaped her desires. I wish to live out my days in the village among my people, she said softly. her voice firm with the decision to remain in the community that had stood by her through her darkest times. The king, understanding and respectful of her wishes, nodded in acceptance. He turned to Ebuka, seeing not just his son but a young man who had earned the trust and love of the entire community. Then, Ebuka, the king announced, "If you are willing, I would have you as my heir. Your compassion and justice have already shown you to be a leader." The crowd erupted in cheers, their approval resounding through the open air. Ebuka, overwhelmed yet uplifted by the support, accepted the role. Committed to being a leader who would stand for truth and fairness, ensuring the kingdom would never again stray from these principles. With Nila by his side, who had been his steadfast partner through every trial, they both were appointed as trusted advisors to the king. Their insight and their integrity brought fresh perspective to the royal council, helping to guide the kingdom into a new era of openness and justice. Their love story, interwoven with their duties, continued to flourish. Nina and Ebuka not only planned their future together, but were integral in shaping the future of the kingdom. Their relationship became a symbol of the harmony and renewal that had taken root in the land. As seasons changed and the kingdom prospered, the love between Ebuka and Nina remained a beacon for all. They were celebrated not just as advisors to the king, but as embodiments of the resilience and compassion that had restored a once-faltering kingdom to glory. That is all for this video. Hope you loved it. Don't forget to subscribe to Flav Adventure for more amazing stories like this. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, share it with your friends, and don't hesitate to leave your comment below. We can also show you support by clicking on the thanks button. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more adventures. Cheers, friend.